The family of the late South African Communist Party leader, Chris Hani, says it is anxiously awaiting Justice Minister Michael Masutha's formal decision on the release of Hani's killer, Janusz Walus. On Thursday, the High Court in Pretoria ruled that the Justice and Correctional Services Department should release Walus in 2 weeks' time. Walus' co-conspirator, Clive W. Lewis, was released on parole 10 months ago. The department is likely to appeal that court ruling. The nephew of the late SACP leader, Mzwandile Masina, says the family is not ready to see Walus walk free. Meanwhile, the ANC in Ekhuruleni will be marching to the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg tomorrow. This follows the North Gauteng High Court's order this week that Waluz be released on parole before month end. And for more on this now, we are joined right here in the studio by the chairperson of the ANC in Ekurhuleni, Mzwandile Masina, who is also the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. Mr. Masina, thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you very much, and to all the viewers at home.
Why are you thinking of marching to the Constitutional Court tomorrow?
Well, thank you very much. This is a very painful and emotional scar to us, in particular as people of Ekurhuleni. You will know that on the 10th of April in 1993, Comrade Chris Hani was gunned down by these two murderers who all of a sudden now have sought to go to the courts, even when there are processes that are clearly outlined in the Correctional Services Act 111 of 1998. We think that we respect the right of the court to always to review the decisions of the executives to check rationality. But in this case, we think that the court is almost encroaching in the space of the executive, and this is very dangerous for our constitution. It is on this basis that we are not even marching to the court that has made a decision, but to the Constitutional Court to basically begin to say to them, if the court is not sensitive on how they review decisions, they run the risk of causing chaos in South Africa. And I think that they have a very important role to play. We respect the rule of law, but we think that they are playing on a dangerous space.
But now, by saying that Walus does not deserve parole, are you then doubting the integrity of the judiciary?
Look, the minister set aside 12 months to relook into the application of Walus. And then during that time, there were two things that were expected to happen. I don't think that the minister nor anybody has said that he must not be released. The issue here is that in the 12 months that the minister has set aside, he wanted to ensure that there is an ongoing dialogue between the offender and the victim, so that at least there is some level of reconciliation. The second critical thing is that it is necessary for the minister or the state to conduct a security assessment whether or not the release of this serial killer, what it will do to South Africa, because Comrade Chris Hani was not just an ordinary citizen, and his death remain very much questionable. At the center of all this is the question of full disclosure. Yeah. And we think that until this man discloses fully as to why did he kill Chris Hani and who instructed him to kill Chris Hani, only at that point we as a party in the region, and I hope even nationally, and the SACP and the family will find closure on this matter. But outside of full disclosure, we're having difficulty in appreciating why the court must jump in to rule when they have no authority. This is a space of the executive, and we think if we are not taking into account these matters, we are going to plunge our country into crisis, because they should defend the constitution.
But is your decision really independent, or is it guided also by the wishes of the Hani family?
We are in consultation with the family, in particular Comrade Hani. We have discussed extensively our approach and why we are reacting, the manner in which we are reacting. In the march, she will be there with us tomorrow, and many other leaders of the ANC, because we think that this is not just a case of somebody who must just be released, but this is a case that can set wrong precedents if left unchallenged. And we're really saying that the courts, in our view, should have waited for the 12 months that the minister set aside to then look into his decision. At this point, we want to call upon the minister to challenge the decision of this court. And as we are going to the Constitutional Court, our view is that we want to asked the court, the Constitutional Court, to review or set aside this decision of the court.
Now,
as a first thing.
there is a paper today that is reporting that one of Hani's daughter, that's Lindiwe, wants to meet Walus in prison next week as part of the victim offender dialogue. Is this a position that you would support as the ANC in Ekhuruleni?
Yes, that's precisely the point. That there must be some ongoing engagement, not with individuals, with the family. Family is a structure. Now, amongst the things that we want to raise quite sharply with the courts is that the issue of full disclosure is critical on the issue. And secondly, we think that in an event the competent authority reaches the decision to release him, we think that time has come for us as a region to call for the release of all other political prisoners in honor of Hani as a gesture if he has to be released after having disclosed fully. And we think that for us will take us a step further. But we are in no way saying that he must be released now. We are saying that there must be these processes where there is a facilitation between the offender and the victim families, that dialogue, and the security assessment, because we also don't want a chaotic South Africa. You will recall when Comrade Chris Hani died, we nearly plunged our country into civil war, and we don't want something close to that. Now,
when this process was announced on Thursday, there were calls from the ANC's national office that should that happen, then Walus must be immediately deported. Is it a stance you support?
We fully support that as the region. We think that the ANC has been very firm, because this is a very hurtful matter. But beyond that, we think that if the competent authority releases him, they must also be able to release all the other political prisoners who were in prison before 1994.
And others are asking, there wasn't so much heightened emotions 10 months ago when the co-conspirator Clive W. Lewis was released on parole. Why this stance with Janusz Walus?
Well, there was. It depends. Remember that in South Africa, we're dependent on the mood of the media. I remember very well that we went to the former house of Comrade Chris Hani in Boksburg, where we had a contingent of people who were really raising their emotions, and we had to go calm them down to make them understand the court process, because we don't want to advocate for a lawlessness country, but also we want the judiciary to respect us, to respect our feelings, and to respect the feelings of the family. That is why we want to take this matter up, and we are told that this particular man is a man who pulled the trigger 4 times to kill our leader, and we are very much that's why we are agitated as the leadership.
And what would you say to those who say that by keeping Walus in prison, that is contrary to the spirit of national reconciliation?
Look, we can't be in the receiving end. The project of nation building has to be a project of everybody. We've seen recently the recent racial remarks, in particular from our white South Africans, and we think that all of us should use occasions like this to understand how far we've come as a country. They must help us and work with us, because it can't be 22 years later, we continue to be a buffer between the rich and poor. In particular, the rich are still white in South Africa, and they don't want to give in. Time has come for us to preach reconciliation that is sensible, because our people are languishing in poverty, they are unemployed, the inequality continue to persist, and we are saying that white South Africans cannot call for everything on our side. They too must reach out so that we can build a united, non-sexist and democratic country that we seek to build as an ANC-led government.
Now, the courts gave Justice Minister just 2 weeks to consider this issue of parole for Janusz Walus, and come the end of that period, what decision would satisfy you from Minister Masutha?
Well, we think the first instance, Minister Masutha must apply against this order, must appeal, this order. And then from there, legal processes must take its course. But we think that the 14 days that the court has given that he must be released is unreasonable, it's unfair, and that is why we're saying that the Constitutional Court must now come in and basically begin to set aside that decision, because it's irrational. In 14 days, there would have no meetings of families, there will be no security assessment, because it's a detailed work that is done by the competent state security department. So we don't want a chaos in our country because of one person who cost us so dearly.
And finally, then your march tomorrow, I know it's targeted specifically at the Constitutional Court. Now, is that symbolic, or is it a match that you are trying to highlight this issue to the broader South African population?
Well, we were speaking to one arm of the state, the judiciary, by going there tomorrow, to say to them, they too have got a role to play like the executive and the legislature. They must not overimpose themselves on other matters of the executive. The issue of parole is the issue of the minister, is not the issue of the court.
All right, thank you so much for your time. That was the chairperson of the ANC in Ekhuruleni, Mzwandile Masina. Now,